Hello everyone, Susan here with the Sacramento History Museum for this week's Museum Monday, where we are talking about the heat and heat waves and kind of the historic precedent we often have set from heat waves. If you, like me, need to beat the heat or the sun for that matter, grab yourself a wonderful accessory. A parasol will do, or perhaps a fan, and you can help beat the heat that way. Now, today is simply a measly 95 degrees as the high temperature here in Sacramento. If you are from Sacramento, you know, oh, that's not so terrible. So don't worry, Sacramentans. The rest of this week, every single day until next Monday, is going to be in the hundreds. So we will be we'll be happy with that, I am sure. Now, this kind of brings to light a question that we've been asking a lot this week. Okay, if the heat is in the 100s for many days at a time, is that what a heat wave is? Or what's the definition exactly of a heat wave? Now, there's actually a lot of different definitions, and it depends on where you are, what country you're in, and a lot of different factors. So the U.S. National Weather Service, what I'm going by, they suggest that a heat wave is when the daytime heat index reaches 105, but that's taking into consideration humidity, so it's different in different parts of the United States. And the nighttime heat index a minimum of 80 degrees, so it doesn't get lower than 80 degrees for 48 hours. So for 2 days it has to be 105 at least, and a low of 80 degrees. That's pretty hot. That's significant. However, there are a lot of studies that talk about different heat considerations, right? That not necessarily the actual temperature should be the main consideration, but instead the magnitude of the heat, the spatial reach of it, the intensity, and just a lot of different factors should actually constitute what a heat wave is. So according to one of these studies, and let me tell you where it's from so you can check it out if you want to. I'm going to put my parasol down so, I am in the sun and make sure I get the name right. The American Meteorological Society, that's who I'm going to be referencing a few times here. We're going to look at a graph that compares temperatures here in California between 1948 and 2006. And we can clearly see spikes that indicate heat waves. So let's look at that graph. I can show you here. This side here, you can see here's a spike about 1950. Another spike around 1961, 62, 63, somewhere in there, I can't quite tell. Another one in 1974, maybe 75. Another one in 1980. The 1990s, actually, not too many big heat wave spikes, but the 1990s as a decade was warmer than the other decades previously. And then in 2000 and beyond, there are some big spikes that indicate some heat waves. This chart here is the daytime heat waves. This chart over here is nighttime. So you can see that's that 80 degree. Over here, they're a lot lower, which is to be expected in the nighttime. However, in 2006, there was a really high nighttime heat wave. And there's been a few of those since then, too, in fact. So they say that those ones, the nighttime heat waves, are actually pretty dangerous because you kind of expect to get, some respite from the heat at night. And it's becoming less frequent as the years are going on. So that's from the American Meteorological Society. Oh, I keep saying it wrong. That's okay. That's who it's from if you need to look it up. All right. So in general, yes, it's getting hotter here in Sacramento, but exactly how hot? It's hard to tell exactly. I was having a little bit of a hard time of finding the official temperature of Sacramento because there are quite a few places that take the temperature every day. So as long as they're taking it every day from the same spot over time, that's a really trusted source, but some of them are different. So for example, I found one record that said on June 15th, 1961, Sacramento reached 115 degrees, while another source for that same day said it was only 111 degrees. And that does make a difference. Those are totally different numbers. They might feel the same to us, but if you are trying to gauge exactly how hot it is or if it's a heat wave event, you need to know exactly what form it is. So according to the measurements that were done at California State University campus, there was a 114-degree day on July 17th, 1925, a 110-degree day on August 11th, 1898, a 108-degree day on August 24th, 1888. So you can tell that they have been taking the temperature for a long time, right? So they're probably a pretty trusted source, at least for their temperature, to see exactly how it has changed over time. This year, according to them, we hit 113 on July 10th. I believe I kind of remember that. It was quite a warm weekend. But let's look at some historic heat waves here in Sacramento. There's certainly no shortage of them, and if you ever get a chance to research historic heat waves, is that something that you're into, or you like looking at old newspaper articles, definitely check some of these out because they're a hoot. I mean, some of them are really written quite funny. So I'm actually going to read you one of them because I thought it was too good not to share. It is titled "Soul Plots with the Hokey Pokey Man." So let's see if I can find that one. Here we go. Soul Plots with the Hokey Pokey Man. I'll show you here. I have a clip of it that I just cut out so you can see the title. This was on June 23rd, 1909. Mercury to 90 degrees and will keep up the pace. San Francisco, June 22nd, the weather forecast. The Sacramento Valley, fair. Wednesday, continued warm, light north wind. Old Soul, and that's what a lot of these old newspapers called the Sun. Old Soul up there, you know, just doing what old does. Had everybody sidestepping yesterday, but the ice cream man. The latter was the busiest individual in Sacramento, and while he labored, men divorced their coats and vests, and women donned their peekaboo waists, and the mercury in the thermometer got blue in the face with trying to record it all. The men up in the post office building, who are paid by Uncle Sam to record weather conditions, gave up their jobs in despair at noon and turned over their offices to the carpet cleaning apparatus. At noon, the thermometer registered 87 degrees. And at 3 p.m., Old Soul had boosted things to 90. In the evening, with the mercury dropped to the 80s again. But this morning, according to the weather prophet, the heat wave will return. So be prepared. Now, you and I might look at that and think, it was how warm? It was 87? And then it was 90? That doesn't seem that warm when we're hitting 104 pretty regularly here in Sacramento. But keep in mind, this is 1909. I should have mentioned that. This is from 1909, that news article. There's no air conditioning, right? There's no the amenities that you and I take for granted maybe and like to use in order to beat the heat. So if the post office people who are working in the building, maybe they're on like a third floor or they're on one of the taller floors, and it's probably sweltering hot in there too. Now, there was something that really stood out to me from this article in particular. Oh, I'll show it to you from that same week on June 24th, 1909. Another article, whole U.S. is swept by a heat wave. Hottest June night the city has ever experienced. It sets new records. Thermometer climbs all over the state. And they often have a lot of articles that focus on, how many deaths throughout the country. And so this one says there's a score die in New York and storm sweeps Chicago during hot spell. So often in Sacramento, that's kind of what they talk about throughout the United States too. Now, in that article I just read, it had a wonderful line that said, the men divorced their coats and vests and women donned their peekaboo waists. I looked at that and I said, what on earth is a peekaboo waist? Well, I looked it up, so don't worry if you're curious about that. I just had to know. And essentially, it's this wonderful, fashionable blouse that helped the ladies stay a little bit cool as well in the summer. So, let's see. The peekaboo waist was a blouse that was made from sheer fabric. And it led to complaints that flesh could be seen through the eyelets in the embroidery or through the trim on the fabric. So the eyelets, like, look at my parasol here, like these might be considered eyelets. So parts that don't actually have fabric on them. In 1913, it was called the X-ray dress. And in August of that year, the police chief from Los Angeles stated his intention to recommend a law banning the X-ray dress. And the mayor of Portland, Oregon, ordered the arrest of any woman caught wearing the X-ray dress on the street. Now, this is interesting. This was in 1913. The article I just read to you was from 1909. 1913, there was a crazy heat wave that swept across the United States, in particular here in California. In fact, on July 10th, 1913, the hottest temperature ever recorded in the world was recorded in Death Valley. It was a whopping 134 degrees. And this was almost broken in both 2013 and 2020 when it reached 129 degrees. I remember 2013. I was in Death Valley at that time, and it felt very, very hot. It was rough. We couldn't actually go outside. Now, here in 2021, perhaps you remember, it was just last month, it reached 130 degrees in Death Valley. So we didn't quite break the record, but you never know. So for reference, at 130 degrees, a medium rare steak is cooked to about 130 to 135 degrees. So yeah, it's pretty warm. It's pretty warm. Now, in 1913, that countrywide heat wave, the Sacramento newspapers focused on deaths in other cities. I think they said there was something like 5,000 people died from that heat wave that year throughout the United States. That's huge. I mean, that's enormous. And so they focused on like cities like Chicago, New York, larger cities. And here in Sacramento, they actually focused on the loss of fruit in the valley. That kind of heat came and it destroyed either the fruit that had already been harvested because it cooked it and it went bad, or it killed the fruit as it hung on the tree. So that was kind of more of the focus here in Sacramento. And I've got other heat waves too throughout the 20th century. Here's a great one from 1910. State sizzles under the sun. Heat wave hits new mark. And the high there at 4:30 was 103. So it's great. Thousands seek relief in cities' plazas from scorching weather. So they were looking for water features and things like that. It's very similar to what we do today. And, I thought I had one more. Oh yeah, here's one. From 1922, it was another big one. September 1922, Capitol swelters under heat wave. And then this one, backbone of heat wave broken, Taylor. Taylor was a meteorologist at the time. And I just love these titles. Like, they're so interesting. The backbone of the heat wave was broken. Oh, very dramatic. So often there are things that trigger heat waves. In 1936, for example, perhaps you know your American history and know that this was a really bad year for the Dust Bowl, and it triggered a countrywide heat wave that summer. That because the drought that was from the Dust Bowl led to low soil moisture, and that caused low vegetation, which caused extreme heat. So all of these things are very connected. So there is ways that these heat waves are very much triggered from. And it affected the entire country. It was mainly in the Midwest, but California experienced hotter than average summers. And so did the East Coast. So it's never just necessarily one spot. One place that has a heat wave will definitely affect other places. Now, what's interesting about the 1936 countrywide heat wave was that it was actually followed by a countrywide cold wave for the winter. The whole country experienced colder than average winters, and Sacramento that year actually experienced a lot more rain than it usually gets. So just kind of interesting the way those kind of patterns start to play out. Now, cold waves, however, are a totally different topic, and I could probably continue and talk about every single heat wave that had happened here in Sacramento. The ones that happened in the 1800s are a little bit harder to find just because the records aren't as easily available, or you might find records that say today was warm, today was very warm, things like that. So it can be a little bit difficult to find exactly the heat, and plus our temperature gauges and whatnot have changed over time and gotten a lot more accurate. So in general though, what we are seeing today are a lot hotter than average temperatures and heat waves in general. So I want to thank you all for joining us on this Museum Monday, and I hope that we'll see you next week when we talk about another extreme weather event, the drought. Thank you.